Welcome everybody. Thank you for coming. We're going to wait a couple of minutes because I feel that it's been a late dinner evening for people. So we're going to get started in a couple of minutes. I really appreciate you all coming and showing an interest in what it means to electrify, what it means to make a plan, and why in many instances making the plan will make electrifying easier and smoother. So what I'll do very quickly is just let you know that it's being recorded. You should have gotten that message to remind you that it's being recorded. If that changes whether you want your video on or we're a small crowd. It's nice to see everybody's faces, but obviously up to you all how you want to be seen. Our next event is on February 28th. We'll be showing the movie Breaking Boundaries, the science of our planet. Both will show the film and we'll have a discussion afterwards. We're doing this in collaboration with Cary Library, and we'll be showing it in person at Cary Library. And there's a limit of 40 people who can attend, and you do need to sign up in advance. We will put the link in the chat to sign up with the library. The movie is quite powerful. I saw it at First Parish, and I felt like it'd be nice to show it with more people. It's an important movie. It kind of keeps us up to date on the science of climate change, but also makes us feel empowered because there are things that individuals can do. Individuals, in this case, tonight we're celebrating the thing that our town wants to do. And we're working together on that. In March, the original plan was to talk about the articles that are happening in Lexington that are environmental in nature. They have to do with tree protection. They have to do with exposing our wildlife to rat poison. So you kill a rat, but you also kill many other things. So that's coming before town meeting. Changing the name of the holiday in October to Indigenous Peoples Day. It's also important. So all of these articles we feel embrace our environment, and however, we're running into some date conflict with town meetings. So stay tuned. You'll get an email that will tell you if we're doing this. What I'd like to see from the people who are here, and if you're not showing your video, is, does this interest you? Would you like to know about town meeting warrant articles so that you can either send a letter in support or send a letter against, or in some way participate? So that's a yes. Any other? Okay, good. I think it's great for us all to know what's happening in our towns so we can participate even if we're not in town meeting or not an elected member. So that's fantastic. We will try to work this out so you all will know prior to town meeting, so you have an opportunity to send a letter. Janice's hand is up. Is your hand up because you want to?
No, okay. I raised my hand saying I was in favor, and it doesn't want to lower it. Here we go.
Yeah,
okay.
That's some people have the ability to do something and make Zoom do something. I don't, but I think
usually when I raise my hand, it doesn't work. So sorry about
that. Okay, so we will be planning that for sometime in early March. Welcome everybody. It's nice to see more people showing up because I think this is really important, and we have the joy and luxury of having Maggie Peard, our Sustainability and Resilience Officer, and Andy Joynt, who is the LexCAN Clean Heat Outreach Specialist. They are going to talk to us about the LexElectrify program and try to help everybody figure out their way through that checklist you got in the mail. How do you join into the program? And I am going to hand it off to Maggie and Andy. Thank you.
Great.
Thanks,
Good
Ricky.
evening, everyone. Really nice to see you here. I'm just going to share my screen. But as Ricky said, I'm Maggie Peard. I'm the Sustainability and Resilience Officer for the town. All right. Should be seeing that screen now. So thank you, Ricky and LexCAN, for hosting and being that consistent force for driving climate action in Lexington. The town's very lucky to have such an active group. Thank you to everyone else for coming, whether you're just here to learn a little bit more about electrification or are far along in your electrification journey. We're grateful that you came tonight, and I'm sure you will have either something that you will learn or you can share with someone else. Just a bit of background on LexElectrify. It's really a team effort that was brought together by the town, LexCAN, and Andy in his role as the clean heat outreach specialist for the town. It's kind of an umbrella initiative that brings together all of the resources that exist at the local, state, and federal level that help individuals take action towards electrification and energy efficiency. So the goal is really to give Lexington residents the inspiration, the information, the resources they need to take their next step towards electrification. So our hope is really that LexElectrify will be that catalyst to accelerating individual action so that it will really scale up to have an effect on the town's goals of reaching net zero emissions by 2050 or sooner. And that really lines up with state goals as well. So in this presentation, we're going to cover a lot of information that I know will prompt questions along the way. So feel free to drop any questions you have in the chat as we go through the presentation. And we'll have plenty of time after the presentation for a Q&A. There's also a number of resources that will be helpful for you to have links to. So we're going to drop in the chat also a Google Doc that has all of the links to the various programs and resources that we're mentioning.
Hi, everybody. Andy Joynt, Clean Heat Outreach Specialist with LexCAN. I just dropped a link into the chat that Maggie referenced that will take you to a page that has a lot of resources that you can utilize. I'll post that link again at the end because we might have some comments in the chat just to make sure people don't lose track of it. So just to touch on our agenda for today, we're going to spend just a little bit of time touching on the current state of climate risk, then talk about the importance of the clean electricity transition, which is a key aspect that will work in tandem with the changes that we make individually. And the bulk of the presentation is going to be what actions we can take in our own lives to electrify our appliances and the infrastructure within our homes and our modes of transportation to further support that transition to a clean economy. So if we go to the next slide, hopefully this image is now familiar to all of you who are on the call today, as this checklist was sent in a townwide mailer to all the Lexington residents. And our presentation today is largely going to follow sequentially through as the checklist does, going through the steps that you can take to make changes in your own life. I would say, this checklist can be a little bit daunting. It would be a tall order to take action on all of these items all at the same time. So what I encourage you to do during the presentation and as you read through this checklist is think about your own life, your own situation, your own home, your own vehicles, and just try to focus on one or two actions that you want to tackle next. And that could be over the next week or next few weeks, but try to zero in there and we can take this piece by piece, chunk by chunk as we go along. And I'll pass it back over to you, Maggie.
So while there are tons of different benefits of electrification, and we'll touch on a number of those as we go through, definitely the real motivation for starting Let's Electrify is the climate crisis. 2023 was the hottest year on record, and it has been 47 years since the Earth has had a colder than average year. In 2023, we saw the deadliest wildfire in US history on Maui, really severe flooding in Vermont, a lot of hurricane activity, and some pretty intense heat waves. And that's really just looking at the US. So not saying all of this to intensify climate doom if you have that going on, but just to highlight the need to be part of the solution and to kind of point out that there are ways that individuals can play a role in this. I think at this stage, we know a lot of the actions that need to be taken. We just need to kind of accelerate the rate at which they're happening. So the rest of this presentation will really walk you through what you can do. So most of the presentation is focused on electrification, but you can't talk about electrification without thinking about what is the source of your electricity. If you switch to electrification and that electricity is purely coming from coal, you're still burning coal. So you often hear that argument that electrification doesn't help from a climate perspective unless you're using electricity that is generated from fossil fuels or is not generated from fossil fuels. And so a couple key points on that. First, the Massachusetts electric grid as a whole is mandated to get cleaner every year. So there's programs called the Renewable Portfolio Standard and the Clean Energy Standard that set requirements for the percentage of electricity generated by renewable energy, and that percentage is mandated to increase every year. So already the Massachusetts New England grid is getting cleaner every year. Second, in Lexington, we have the Community Choice Electricity Aggregation Program, which already offers residents 100% renewable energy. So making sure you're enrolled in Community Choice is one of the easiest ways that you can support renewable energy, especially if you opt up to the New England Green option. That option really drives demand for installation of renewable energy projects more locally because it's sourced just from New England regional projects. If you're not sure if you're enrolled, reach out to me. I'll give you my contact information at the end. And it's easy to check whether you're enrolled. Just one thing to note about the Community Choice Program is a lot of you all got notices that the prices went up at the end of last year. So the prices rose at the beginning of the year when the town's previous contract ended with Constellation, and the rates went up to market levels. And so even though our prices went up by around 3 cents, all of those options are still lower than Eversource's basic service rate, which is around just over 17 cents per kilowatt hour. And another benefit of this program is it's a constant price. So our price is constant through December of 2026, and Eversource's prices change every 6 months. So even if the rates have gone up, you still can really depend on that stable price, and you'll still see some savings compared to Eversource's rates. Andy, you want to jump in there?
Yeah, and I'll just add a personal anecdote. It's a hard moment right now when you get your bill in January after a price change goes into effect. I don't know, for me, I don't have heat pumps yet, so the winter time is my lowest electricity cost period of the year, plus those shoulder periods. So there's some sticker shock that comes when the rates go up on both the supply side and on the delivery charges, which is still Eversource's territory, even if you are on the community aggregation plan. So just for me, in my case, I had $150 December electric bill, and if I utilized that same amount of electricity in January, my bill would have gone up from $150 to $175, $25, which over the course of the year really adds up. But I just look at that, and then I look at Eversource's rates, and my bill would have, instead of $150, it would have been $200 if I was not participating in the Community Choice Program. So I know it's a hard pill to swallow for a lot of folks to see their electricity prices going up, and we're talking about electrification today. I just got a fully electric vehicle myself, so not only am I seeing increasing prices, but also a lot more kilowatt hours being used on my bill. So I just wanted to make sure that that we were upfront that, you know, we understand that it's a hard pill to swallow to look at your rates and then be considering electrification and know that that's only going to cause your bills to go up. The counter to that is I'm not paying for gas at the pump anymore now that I have an EV. I also, if I'm doing something like switching to heat pumps, you're significantly going to reduce your fuel costs, especially if you go with a whole home replacement of heat pumps. Your fuel costs are going to go to zero. So there are offsetting factors to consider. But I just felt it was appropriate for us to kind of address what I think everybody's seeing right now when they're getting their January bills. On this topic of trying to find ways to realize energy savings, for some folks, there's energy savings that you could be realizing that maybe you're not taking advantage of today. So we also want to highlight some of the energy savings programs that are out there right now, in particular the Low Income Home Energy Assistance Program, or LIHEAP. LIHEAP offers a range of different services, most primarily a subsidy for your own home fuel. You can get discounted energy rates. You can get help offsetting the costs of maintenance and repair on your heating systems. To qualify, there's different levels of qualifications depending on the program. The most sort of standard or baseline one is a comparison of your home's income level to the state median income level. And that depends on the number of people in your household. So for 2024, you know, I've circled it here, but just to flag a couple of them individually, a two-family household earning $59,000 or less would qualify for LIHEAP, or a four-person household earning around $87,000 or less would qualify for that LIHEAP Home Energy Assistance Program. So if you're in that bracket, do not let those savings go unutilized. You should certainly utilize the LIHEAP program. So we wanted to make sure people are aware of that as well. So going on to the next slide, now we're going to get into the bulk of our presentation, which is, okay, so Maggie addressed how we're cleaning up our sources of electricity on the grid. Now we need to pair that with what we can do in our own homes to reduce our carbon footprint by converting the appliances and infrastructure in our homes to electrical sources. So in the next series of slides, we'll discuss what we can do as individuals to tackle that. I wanted to just pause here and address what I think is another common impediment that people feel in taking these kinds of actions, which is, you know, if I switch to heat pumps, isn't that just a small drop in the bucket of what we need to do in Lexington and Massachusetts, globally, in the battle against climate change and in cleaning up our lives and our economy. So what I wanted to just highlight below is, you know, we have LexElectrify, our program here in Lexington, but neighboring towns like Newton with For Our Future, there's a program that they've got going on that's doing very much the same thing. At the state level, there are programs. At the federal level, there's Rewiring America program for electrification as well. So I really want people to feel like while you're taking that individual action, there are many others. It really is a team effort of people working together, and that's what's really going to amount to the change. I'm going to just drop a link into the chat to our Lexington Climate Action Toolkit, which it's a great website because if you sign up and you create an account on that website, you can log the individual actions that you're taking, and people across Lexington can do this as well, and it will aggregate all of the actions that we're taking together as a community in supporting this effort. And when I go to that website, I really do kind of feel like, yes, I'm contributing to something that's greater than my individual action. I'm contributing to a larger movement here. So I would encourage people to utilize that. So the bulk of our comments today are going to revolve around things that we can do in our own homes that focus on the building sector, is for good reason. Over 70% of our town's emissions come from the building sector. And that's not just residential buildings. And we've got a lot of efforts that Maggie's working on to help reduce GHG emissions in the commercial and municipal building space. But we can make a lot of headway on our path to net zero by making our residences more energy efficient and by electrifying them. So people will look, when they're looking to take on this process, will wonder, what is my first step? And the first step is, in almost every situation, going to be, weatherization, making sure that your home is properly sealed, because if you're going to be upgrading your heating or cooling equipment, it's not going to do nearly as much good if you're losing much of that nicely conditioned air through poorly insulated walls or drafty windows. And there's many benefits of doing it. The primary benefits are you're going to reduce your heating and cooling costs if you have a tighter building envelope. The temperatures throughout your home are going to be more even, and you're going to reduce your carbon footprint, because even if you're still on natural gas, for example, for your heating, if you have a tighter envelope around your home, you're not going to need to burn as much gas to keep your home at the proper temperature. So this really is the key starting point. And as we go to the next slide, to get people started on that path to weatherization, where you're going to want to start there is to schedule a free home energy assessment. So this is sort of the Mass Save kind of runs this program, where you can go to Mass Save, and the link that we shared with the resources has a link to Mass Save. And this can be your starting point for finding a home performance contractor. Sometimes they're called HPCs. And these are the entities that can do a home energy assessment. We've flagged one of them, which is HomeWorks Energy. It's a entity that Lexington partners with, and they do a lot of great work in doing the home energy assessments, and they also do contracting work as well. But there are many options out there for these home performance contractors, and you can use the search tool on Mass Save to find one. That home energy assessment is really a significant step, because the assessment will provide you with a list of the specific steps that you need to take in your own home to tighten that building envelope, whether it's air sealing around the home, closing up drafty windows, or adding actual insulation in different parts of your home. And that home energy assessment, when you get it, first of all, just to reiterate, this is a free service that is provided through Mass Save. So there's no downside to signing up. And once you get that home energy assessment provided to you, you can use that in a couple different ways. You can provide it to a contractor to give them a very easy scope of work for them to do. You also use that home energy assessment to submit to Mass Save, and that really is the key to authorizing rebates that you'll use for heat pumps if you're going in that direction. You have to first weatherize your home up to a certain standard before you can access the rebates that are available for things like heat pumps. So it's really a key step. Again, it's free, so there's really no downside to doing it. When we talk about weatherization, this is really kind of a I love this slide, because when you look across the different incentives and rebates that are available, weatherization can end up coming in extremely cheap. The rebates are very strong for weatherization. You can nearly fully offset the costs through the rebates that Mass Save offers, plus the federal tax credits that are available. You also have the option of obtaining zero interest financing through Mass Save's heat loan program. We're going to talk a lot about Mass Save heat loan program later on in the presentation. But this sort of suite of rebates and credits that are available to you can make this weatherization process really, really cheap. And it's a really great and effective way to take a first step in this process.
So as Andy mentioned, weatherization, you definitely want that to be your first step, but kind of once you've completed that and you're ready for what's next, clean heating and cooling is going to be a great kind of bigger project to think about. So with clean heating and cooling, we're mainly talking about heat pumps. So both air source heat pumps and ground source heat pumps are highly efficient systems that use electricity rather than fossil fuels to heat and cool your home. Cold climate heat pumps are designed to operate effectively even in cold Massachusetts. So we're actually seeing that Maine is one of the states really leading the charge on heat pump adoption, and they're a whole lot colder than we are here in Massachusetts. That technology has really advanced a great deal in the past decade or so, that they can really perform down to low temperatures. Just some other benefits. Heat pumps can improve the indoor air quality in your home because they are just removing the fossil fuel source that add indoor pollution to your home. They also offer big savings in terms of operational cost, which I'll touch on in a couple slides, but especially when compared to oil or propane and electric resistance systems. People with heat pumps also report a much more comfortable home. When we get to Q&As, perhaps we can have some folks with heat pumps speak a bit more to that. And then lastly, they're 4 times as efficient than a combustion heating system. So for 1 unit of energy for an electric resistant system, you're getting 1 unit of heat out. But for heat pumps, you're putting 1 unit in and getting 4 units of heating out. So that's leading to much reduced emissions from these systems. And so anyone who is thinking about heat pumps in your home should know about the Lexington Heat Smart program. It's a town program that launched the beginning of last year, 2023, to help you navigate the entire process of transitioning to heat pumps. And so through the program, you can connect with one of our 8 trained energy advisors who can answer your questions about the technology and give you advice as you navigate the process. You can access a list of vetted contractors, and once you have quotes back from contractors, you can take advantage of a quote comparison report tool, and also just talk with your energy advisor about kind of how to think about how to choose a contractor from the quotes. Our program is supported by Abode, which is a company that specializes in heat pump technology, and so they're also available if there is an especially complex situation. We can also connect you with an expert at Abode. We've seen really great success from the program so far. We've had over 150 residents take advantage of the program, and around 30 heat pump installation contracts signed already, and a lot more that are on their way to that. And I mentioned I would talk a little bit more about fuel costs. So this chart is hyper local. It's about with Lexington prices to compare what is the annual heating cost for an average home in Lexington with different fuel sources. So you'll see that air source heat pumps compare very closely with heating with gas. They're really right about the same. We had seen in the past few years, or the past few, I guess, months before the electricity increase, that was even lower. So if electricity prices go down again, you could see even more savings there. But especially when you're looking at comparing to propane or oil, just the amount of kind of annual savings you'd be seeing when switching to heat pumps. And then the real savings come if you contemplate you have a heat pump system with solar on your roof, and then you're reducing those energy costs substantially. So just wanted to highlight that. That's kind of how the cost breakdown goes. And I know there's a lot on this slide. I'm not going to cover everything since you can find this information in more detail on the LexElectrify website. But I'll just point out a few things here. You'll see that there are a lot of different incentives that can help you lower the costs both for air source and ground source heat pumps. So in this first column, Mass Save, there is up to a $10,000 rebate for if you transition your whole home to being heated with air source heat pumps. And that goes up to $15,000 for ground source heat pumps. I'll also highlight the federal incentives. So you can get 30% of your project cost back as a tax credit up to $2,000 for a heat pump installation. And then for financing, there's 0% interest loan that we'll talk about again at the end. But that can really reduce your upfront costs and make it a more stable monthly payment that can make a project a lot more financially feasible. So just taking a look at what kind of an example project might look like. Again, this is just an example. Prices are going to change dramatically depending on your home, the size of your home, your contractor, all of that. But say, for instance, you have a project that comes in for transitioning to heat pumps for $25,000, and you're transitioning your whole home, you'll be eligible for that $10,000 off from Mass Save, and the federal tax credit that I mentioned of $2,000. And then once you've finished the project, you can also apply for what's this alternative energy credits. And that's something you can apply for afterwards. You basically are getting credit for using a heating system that's not using fossil fuels. That's a state program. And so you look at this and you're down to a total cost of $12,000, down from $25,000. And then if you're looking at taking out a Mass Save heat loan, you're now looking at just monthly payments of $143 if you take advantage of the full 7-year term. So that just gives you kind of an example of what it will look like. Again, it'll be very different depending on each home, but wanted to highlight an example.
All right, I'm just popping in quickly again, and it's going to be back to Maggie. But what I always think of when after hearing Maggie talk about heat pumps is that they're the wave of the present, not the wave of the future. They are technology that is being utilized in many homes in Lexington right now, and really are a great and powerful way to reduce your carbon footprint today. But they're not the only way, and they're not the only appliances and sort of infrastructure that we have in our homes. There's a lot of appliances that we have in our homes today that could be electrified. So we've laid out a graphic here that shows just some ideas. There's a lot of rebates available for all of these different types of appliances as well. And rather than going into all the details on those here, what I just want to highlight here is a few examples and ask people just to look across some of these ideas: battery powered lawn equipment, or heat pump hot water heaters, solar hot water heaters. There's a lot of different directions that you can go in this movement to electrify your home. So think about your own home. Think about what equipment is aging and what is soon going to need to be replaced. You want to research the options now so that when that equipment fails in the middle of February and suddenly you don't have hot water, you're not caught on your back heels, not ready to make a decision to move to a cleaner technology because you are not aware of it or haven't researched it yet. Try to do that work now so that you're ready when the time comes to replace that piece of equipment, to make that decision and move forward confidently. And again, this is not purely heat pumps that we're talking about here, but the Lexington Heat Smart team there's likely someone on the team who has done solar hot water heaters or one of these other pieces of equipment, and we like talking about this stuff and we like helping people with this transition. So if you're thinking about any of this type of equipment and have questions too, please feel free to reach out through that Heat Smart program. Back to you, Maggie.
All right, so now we're going to move into solar. And we talked in the beginning about the importance of a renewable electricity source, and really going solar is the most direct way you can have an impact on this. By installing solar, you can have a tremendous savings on your electricity bill and even receive credits for producing renewable energy. And if you're pairing a solar system on your roof with a battery storage system, you can also have some kind of resiliency protection of you may be able to source your own power during a short power outage and not lose heat, not have to have your refrigerator goods spoil. So kind of a resiliency benefit there. And then also there's great rebates and incentives here as well. So with the available state and federal tax credits, you can get up to 45% of the project cost back. I will note that for some people, having solar on your roof is not feasible. You may be a renter, or your roof doesn't get enough sun for it to be a feasible project for you. So if this is the case, we also recommend looking into community solar. Essentially, that is you are kind of buying into a solar project that is somewhere else nearby. And through kind of buying into that project, you're going to get credits back. And typically these programs offer you a 15% savings on your electric bills over the course of the year. So that's a great way. You can't put solar on your own roof to still support renewable energy and still see some cost savings. So if you're thinking about going solar, these are two resources to check out. Energy Sage is an online marketplace where you can really quickly get quotes back from vetted solar installers. And we'd always recommend, seeking quotes from other local installers as well, just kind of as a check. But it's a great place if you're just starting to explore solar to get a sense of what it might cost, kind of see if your roof is a feasible site for solar. And then on that same point for Project Sunroof, this is a really interesting tool made by Google where you can just type in your address and get the solar potential based on your home orientation and the roof area. I will add a small asterisk here that there have been some changes with recent fire codes that do restrict the room where you can put solar on your roof. So it may be a bit of an overestimate of how much solar you can put there. But it's interesting as you're starting to think about going solar to just get a sense of how your roof might be. And then again, we have the incentive page here. So for solar and also for battery storage, you can get a mix of tax credits and ongoing payments just for having solar installed. So there's a state tax credit where you can get up to $1,000 back. And then again, this 30% federal tax credit for both solar and battery storage systems. And then there's programs like the SMART program and selling renewable energy credits where you can get payments on an ongoing basis for your solar system as well. So just like the heat pumps, I'm going to go through just an example. There's a lot more to this, and you don't need to take in every number, but this is actually a real project that went in 2014 in Lexington. So again, it's an older project. Some of these costs may not reflect current prices, but gives you a sense of kind of what this will look like. So over on the project cost side, the panel cost was around $30,000, and the home needed the roof replaced as well. So for this project, they were looking at a total cost of around $37,000. And then right from that cost, you were able to knock off $1,000 from the state tax credit and $11,000, that's the 30% of the project cost from the federal tax credit to look at a $25,000 project. So certainly still a large investment, but for solar, you really see the payoff after a number of years, and you will see savings each year. So on this other side, we're looking at the annual average operational savings. And I won't go through each of these savings. We can dive into more of those in the questions if folks are wondering about them. But you're going to get a number of different payments back for having solar installed on your roof, and also just see great electricity savings. You're not going to be paying that full electric bill every month. So for this project, they saw total annual savings of $3,300, which led to a payback period of 7.5 years. So at the end of that period, they had totally paid off their project, and we're seeing savings coming through even beyond that. So it gives you a sense of, yes, it's definitely an investment, but if you're able to kind of finance it up front, you will see some great payback after 7-ish years. And that's back to Andy.
All right. Well, I just wanted to return to a graphic that we showed towards the beginning of the presentation, inventorying where our GHG emissions come from in the town. And we talked a lot so far about the building sector, but let's not forget about the transportation sector, which is 23% of our town-wide emissions. Now, I will say Lexington is doing way better than many towns in Massachusetts, and I can only assume many towns across the country in our electric vehicle adoption. We're among the top towns in EV adoption, which is really great. The flip side to that is folks in Lexington do drive a lot. We also rank really high in vehicle miles traveled. And maybe that's due to the fact that we don't have a T, we're not right on a commuter line. But there are bus routes, and MBTA does serve Lexington. So we have a couple of options for trying to green our transportation sector. And before we get into EVs, the first one I want to address is we could just try to drive less, and there's a lot of options for doing that. The Lexpress goes right to downtown Lexington, to the Burlington Mall, the community center, a lot of common destinations for folks in Lexington. So there are links in that document that we sent around at the beginning of the presentation that can give you information on how to ride the Lexpress, and also the Lexington, I always mess up the name, Bike Walk and Bus group also provides a lot of great resources in figuring out ways to not get behind the wheel when you have other options to bike to your destination or take the bus. So reducing our vehicle miles traveled will go a long way to reducing greenhouse gas emissions, but also switching your car from the traditional internal combustion engine to an electric vehicle, fully electric, plug-in hybrid. Those will also really go a long way to greening our modes of transportation. So just wanted to flag a couple of items here. If you're considering an EV, Green Energy Consumers Alliance is a really great resource. GECA is kind of the acronym there. Their website lists all the different EV models and what rebates they qualify for. So there are state rebates available in Massachusetts, but only if the MSRP of the vehicle is below $55,000. There are federal rebates available as well, but some vehicle makers only qualify for part of the federal rebate. Some qualify for the whole federal rebate. So there's a lot to navigate through there. And the GECA website just lays it all out there for you. So I highly recommend that as a resource for people. And Maggie just dropped it once again into the chat here. I think the benefits of an EV are known to folks. No tailpipe emissions being the highlight there. You also have lower maintenance costs with an EV. You don't have to get an oil change. You don't have to get a fluid transmission change. So you're just making fewer stops at the auto shop for regular maintenance. So that's really a great advantage as well. And then I think most folks probably are going to be charging their vehicles at home. That I think is what's most typical. But when you do have to charge outside of the home, there's a lot of great resources for finding charging stations. PlugShare is just one that I'll highlight to people that really is an easy way of finding charging stations. And there's kind of peer reviews of the charging stations, so you can have a sense for whether it's functional or broken, what rates they charge, things like that. So that's going to cover our content on the vehicle section. And now where we're going to go next is to return again to what we've mentioned a couple times, which is the Mass Save Heat loan. Sometimes when we go through this slide, I feel a little bit like a loan salesman, and I typically am not a person in favor of like encouraging people to go into debt or anything like that. But I think when you look at this presentation, what might stand out to people is the examples that we're giving for transitioning to heat pumps comes with a $25,000 price tag. And in just one example, solar panels were I think close to 40,000 in the example that we gave. So for a lot of folks, that money is not just lying around in liquid assets ready to be spent. But there are great financing tools out there. If you go and try to get a home equity loan line of credit right now to fund some of these home upgrades, home equity loans right now are at like 9%. We're in a really high interest rate environment. The Mass Save Heat Loan Program is 0% interest loans. It is like crazy that this exists and is out there, but it is a real thing. We have clients of ours that participate in the heat loan, the Heat Smart program, that are going out and getting authorization for these loans today to fund their heat pump programs. The way that this basically works is when you go through the Mass Save process, you get your home energy assessment, you get your authorization form that sort of instructs you on how to go about this process. You basically follow the weatherization recommendations. You get a quote from your contractor for heat pumps, for example, and then you submit that contractor quote back to Mass Save, and they will authorize. They will provide you with an authorization form that you can then take to a lender and get up to 25,000 is the max, unless you qualify for, there are certain income qualifications where you can go higher than that, but the typical loan max is 25,000 to fund the work that's being done to install your heat pumps. The repayment period is up to 7 years. There's no prepayment penalty. So it's to me, it's kind of a no-brainer if you're looking to fund some of these home projects. The one caveat that I have to mention is, although when you walk down Mass Ave in downtown Lexington, all you see are bank branches on your left and on your right, there are very few banks that actually participate in the heat loan program. So you can go to the Mass Save website and search for like all the participating banks, but the local ones to us are listed here at the bottom: Eastern Bank, Hanscom Federal Credit Union, and then the Lexington Mass Federal Credit Union. Although to qualify there, you have to be, I think, a school teacher or a firefighter. You have to have kind of more of a municipal type of employment. But for Eastern Bank and for Hanscom Federal Credit Union, those are two participating banks that will ask you to set up a basic deposit account, become a member of their bank, and then you can apply. You can use that authorization form from Mass Save and apply for a loan at 0% interest. So I highly encourage people to look into that as a way to make the costs of some of these home upgrade projects more feasible. And happy to answer any questions about that as well. So that takes us to the end of our prepared remarks. So Maggie just flipped to a slide here that has my and her contact emails. Please don't hesitate to reach out to us with any questions or follow-up items. And then on the next slide, we're just going to go back to the LexElectrify checklist again. And the reason I wanted to just bring this one back up is what I really like about this checklist is that part right down on the bottom right there, where it has a little space for you to highlight what your next step will be. So I want to encourage people right now in the chat to think about what they've heard today, and just jot down in the chat what one particular item is that you're thinking about researching next. I know for me, I was focused on EVs for a while as we were considering adding a new car, and I think my next is going to be solar on our rooftops. And I see somebody else, Deepak, also mentioned solar as one to look into. So go ahead and drop that into the chat. And then I think we're ready to probably transition into questions. So Ricky, maybe I'll hand it off to you. Do you think we're gonna go breakout rooms, or do you want to keep it more central?
So we had in our mind a threshold for breakout rooms, and I think we're there. I guess I want to ask the audience. We wanted to break out into rooms on solar. One on solar, one on heat pumps and weatherization, and one on electric vehicles. Or we could all just stay together and everybody ask their questions all at once. We're just thinking that if you have a specific heat pump question about your house, you might like to go into a room with a heat pump person. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to open up the breakout rooms. If you need help getting into a breakout room, raise your hand and I can put you in a breakout room. If and you can go from room to room. If you're familiar with breakout rooms, you can just go where it says breakout rooms and then just switch, or you can come back to the main room. Maggie and I are definitely going to stay in the main room where you can ask sort of general questions. I think all the questions that were put in the chat were answered already. And I see Andy, you answered the question about the whether the loan was going away.
Yes,
right?
there was a mailer that went out to a lot of people that said, you know, act now, the rebate is expiring in April, and it's just not true. And maybe that particular entity is no longer going to participate in April. I'm really not sure of, but the rebates are ongoing. There is no sort of rush to get this done, or you're going to miss it. The rush is really, I think, the action that we all feel we need to take today, when we're seeing like hundreds of thousands of people without power in California, and because of these downpours. So.
Right. So let's see. I'm going to open up the breakout rooms. So we're going to have Janice Litwin. Janice, want to raise your hand? Janice is a heat smart advisor in Lexington. So some of you, if you've put heat pumps in, you may have met her through that way. So if you have specific questions about heat pumps or weatherization prior to getting heat pumps, you can go into that room. You may have questions on all three things and want to go into the three different rooms. Andy Joynt, who you've been hearing from, he's going to head up our electric vehicle room because he just went through the whole process. So it's very fresh in his mind. And Marcia Jens, who ran LexCAN solar energized program with Fran Ludwig, who's also on the phone. She's going to head up the solar room. So I'm opening up the rooms, and you should all have some thing that's showing you what the different rooms are. Yes?
It looks like you may have assigned.
I see join breakout room 1, but that wouldn't be solar, would it?
No. Okay.
Okay. I'll send that out.
Let me try this. I'm going to close all rooms again. Okay.
We could also try seeing what general questions people have and
sure,
have them put it in the chat, and we can get a sense for whether breaking out makes the most sense. We're right on the edge of having.
So feel free to unmute yourself, but raise your hand and I'll call on you, and then the appropriate knowledge person will answer your question. Or maybe a few knowledge people.
Yes.
Any questions at all about what you've seen here tonight?
Also, feel free to drop questions in the chat if you don't want to voice them audibly.
Right. Meg?
Yeah, I had a question about the whole house rebate. If you end up doing just part of your home, does that will that qualify for a prorated rebate? Is that how that works?
Yes, it's per ton if it's not whole house, but it can accumulate. So as I understand it, once you've done your whole house, you could accumulate up to that, to the 10,000.
Okay, I see. Very good. Thank you.
Sure.
Janice, maybe the per ton, I think for someone who's not knowledgeable might be
Oh,
hard
sorry,
to wrap your
it's
head
how
around.
big the heat pumps are.
Like,
sorry, it's how big the heat pumps are.
Do you have a sense for like how many tons would be for like a 2,500 square foot house, roughly?
It depends on how much heating you need, what's called your heat load, how many BTUs you need to heat your house. In our case, I'm a heat pump advisor because we installed heat pumps 2 years ago and carted our oil furnace and tank out of the house. And we had to go all ductless heat pumps because we did not have a house that had ductwork that could support doing the easy way, which was ducted. And we've got, I would say, and our house is a little smaller than that. It really depends. A house that size could have anything from 100,000 to 20,000, depending on how tight it is. So when you're talking about how big a heat pump you would need, that's where the weatherization, the home energy assessment, is so critical, because if you tighten up your house, you can bring down your heating needs significantly. So you could have a smaller heat pump. So like if you had something called a 4-ton heat pump, that's 48,000 BTUs.
And a 4-ton heat pump at a rebate of $12.50 per ton would get you 5,000 in rebates.
So it's still significant. Yeah, it's still significant.
How is the energy assessment requirement, or how tight your home is done? How is that? How do they assess that? I mean, if you have a lot of,
well, first of all, they run around and check for leaks all over your house. Windows are a big source. That's probably the biggest source. Windows, doors, looking at your attic. Attic is a big place that needs insulation most of the time. So the things that have they can check on that. They do everything from what's called a blower door test. If any of you have ever had that, you're familiar with that. For those of you who aren't, an enormous fan gets put in your front door and they see where the leaks are as it pulls it. I can tell you, when we had ours done, what they came up with was, we had mark of what was, it was supposed to be, it was like 4,000 something, and tightening up things brought it down by a full 1,000, which meant we could use smaller heat pumps. So there's a variety of ways of doing it, but a lot of it has to do with where all the leaks are. And a lot of what the assessment does, the home energy people, is it's free. They do a lot of it at no cost, and the things that you do have to pay for, they cover 80% of it. So that, as an example, there was a lot they needed to do on our house, and it was more than $5,000 worth of work, and I think we had to pay 1,000. So it wasn't bad.
Yeah.
I just want to add a little caveat to what Janice said, because not all heat assessors do that process where they pull the air out. I forget, I'm blanking on the name of that process.
Blower door test.
Yeah, blower door test. That is the best way to do it. Unfortunately, they used to do it in the beginning, but it is worth it. I think you can. Janice, I don't know if you paid to have it done, or if it's just who you use that used the blower door test.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, if you suspect you have a lot of leaks, you might want to try to find a company that would do a blower door test, because it is. I've had them done, and it is, kind of amazing when they shine lights and you see where all the air is going around your cans of the lights that are in your ceiling.
Right, they can walk around.
You'll lose a lot of air that way. So, so depending on what you want, but it is true that, and when they come into your house, they're going to go around and they're going to have some insulation and this and that. They do some things right on the spot. So
the other, The other thing is that not all of the assessments are equal. Some, companies are more thorough than others. One thing I've heard is that if you are wondering, you are thinking you have a house that could maybe has good ductwork and you might want to convert it to a whole house ducted heat pump, that if you tell the home energy assessment person who comes that you're thinking of that, they're more likely to pay more attention to your ductwork to see if that's leaky or not. So again, some are better than others at this, and we can suggest some good ones that people have had good luck with.
That's great.
Dan, I see that your hand is up. I just want to go to Deepak's comment in the chat. Marcia, I'm not sure if you know anything about Tesla solar roofing. I
I
heard
have
about it.
offered in the chat to look into that specifically,
Okay.
to Deepak, but I don't
Okay.
know offhand that there
Great.
are limitations by as opposed to electric cars. I'm not aware of limitations to the tax credits for panels. If anyone else knows, feel free to chime in. But I'm going to look that up.
Great, thanks. We'll send links out after this to everybody in town who got our mailing from LexCAN, and we'll try to answer some of these questions in that document, since we don't have all of your names and email addresses. Dan.
Yes, thank you. I have a lot of issues about my own particular situation, but I think there's one thing that's common to, one concern I have that's common to almost everybody who is listening and considering doing some electrification, except for those with solar and perhaps electric vehicles. We're very dependent on the electric grid. And I have never had a problem personally with natural gas supply being interrupted, although they did have that in Andover, and there was one explosion in another part of town during my 40 or so years I've been living here. But electricity is just unreliable. You have a storm and trees fall down on power line. We did have a transformer fire in the center a few years ago, and to be dependent, for everybody in town to be dependent on one source of energy strikes me as very risky in the grand scheme of things. So I know there's really basically one organization owns all the utility poles and wiring in Lexington. And are they going to be doing something to enhance the reliability of their services? Or are we putting ourselves in a very vulnerable position where houses will freeze because there's a bad storm in the middle of winter, the temperature is 10 or 0 or 10 below, and people aren't getting power?
So I can jump in there. So
Yeah, please.
So when my power's out, I can't run my furnaces, because the furnace, it relies on electricity as well as as a way to actually run the motors to do its thing. So when my electricity is out, I've got no heat. Now a generator can help supplement, and I could stick my my furnace onto a generator, and the traditional furnaces don't require nearly as much electricity, so you can run them effectively on a backup generator. It's
Right.
not so much the case with heat pumps that are a lot
You need
more
small amounts
energy
of
hungry.
electricity. And my gas domestic water heater doesn't use any electricity at all, other than what's self-generated and a little battery. So if I lost central heat, at least I would be able to run hot water in various rooms, keep the pipes from freezing, get a little bit of heat into the house from that. We're going in the wrong direction here, I'm afraid, from a reliability viewpoint.
I have
Yeah,
to
I
hop
think
in on one more piece of that. I think Fran in the chat mentioned a good solution here, as well as battery storage can be an effective way for at least those short power outages to supply some backup power to really the critical systems in your home that won't be effective for a very, very long power outage. So I understand your concern, and it's definitely something that's being talked about at the state level. There's state groups that are looking at grid modernization, looking into kind of grid capacity for long-term planning, because the state is really committed to this goal of net zero emissions by 2050 as well. So some of that, I think, goes beyond kind of what we are doing just in Lexington to some state grid modernization that's ongoing. And then the other piece of kind of something that can be done more locally is this idea of microgrids. So creating kind of smaller areas in town for emergency situations that are islanded from the grid. So you have solar that also has battery storage and a few critical buildings being connected in that way is a resiliency measure that is definitely gaining traction as people consider exactly what you're concerned about. So that's definitely something that over the next few years, I know in Lexington will be interested at looking into more for some of those critical emergency locations. But yeah, definitely, it's a great question.
Thank you for trying to answer.
Yeah, and I'll try a little stab at an answer. For one, I've lived in Lexington since 1976. And I have to say that my experience of power outages, and I've lived in this house for 36 years, has gone down significantly. So I do credit the Eversource with their tree trimming around the wires. There is work, they have done work. So I feel like my grid, which used to go out on a much more regular basis, is more stable. But grid modernization is definitely, it's coming. We had to talk about it in January because it is a huge topic. Dan, you are certainly not the only person to raise this question. So there are a lot of very smart minds looking at this and understanding that we need to change business. And so I feel confident that we are going to solve that, because I know that a lot of people are talking about it and planning for it and working towards it. So I guess that's my answer. I've had heat pumps in my house since 2017. I really, I can't remember having a power outage here for longer than maybe 15 minutes. So my heat pumps came back on pretty quickly. I know that other people in town recently had longer outages. But as Andy said, certain things are not going to work with an outage anyway. And we are looking in town at ways for power walls to be more accessible to more people as a backup as we try to achieve our climate goals. Deepak.
Yeah, I would like to share my experience. I live here on Forest Street, not too far from the Lexington, the city, the town area. And we lost power for 4 or 5 days during recent storms. Eversource would not come here and fix the problem, the down lines for 4 or 5 days. They were down from 2 different sides. And, pretty much every aspect was completely crippled. We couldn't use our furnace because it has a dependency on electricity. Lost a lot of stuff in the refrigerator, so on and so forth. When we talk to our neighbors, they have not seen this kind of outage since 90s. So 20, 30 years. But it's one of those occurrences that just makes you question whether we have too much of dependency on electricity. Could something be done? So when I got my basement done, my furnace did not have that makeup air. It was we were forced to do that because of safety standards, the carbon monoxide poisoning related cases probably. So we introduced that dependency because of the latest standards. It doesn't work in our favor when we have such calamities and such storms, because you don't have any sustainability. So that's a very fair question. I think we need to balance it out somewhere. I don't think EverSource, whatever they do with the grid reliability, is not going to help, because these storms will knock out power, on poles, lines, so on and so forth. There are so many different fault lines there, right?
Well, when I talk about grid modernization, it is not relying completely on EverSource. There are other groups out there who are developing distributed grid systems eventually, and it may not be very long. All of us who have electric cars, we're going to have electric cars that go in both directions. So we're going to take electricity out of the grid, and then we're going to get a call from it's not going to be a call, but we're going to get word that EverSource needs our electricity. So we don't put up peaker plants that put out fossil fuels. You plug your car in, you are now part of the grid. You get paid to give back to the grid, but you become part of the backup. So there's a lot of very interesting things going on in this grid space that will be more reliable, because as Maggie said, it will be more Maggie or Andy, whoever said it, will be more localized. We can try to develop more independent grids. People who have batteries in their house will feed back to the grid. I know Marcia does some of that with her. Marcia can speak to her. She has solar panels and power cells. And Marcia, why don't you talk about what happened when you lost electricity in your neighborhood?
I have been very fortunate in having kind of a seamless transition. When the power goes out, we don't actually notice it right away, but we do get an alert from the app on my battery. So we then shut everything down. So we just use the battery to provide the function of, we still have oil heating, so it will provide that little spark, which you could also do with a generator. But I'm very interested in figuring out how you could subsist with heat pumps that would heat the house. So that's something I'm investigating. I put in the chat, to Ricky's point, that this bi-directional charging for cars, where you can use your car as a battery, is already here. The F-150, Mark Sandine has a neat way of discussing this, but can give you a 3-day supply of electricity for a home. I can't give you the numbers on that, but we can look into that. So we're on the cusp of, I think, really great backup solutions. But we're all, part of the reason we got batteries is we wanted to make sure we could keep the sump pumps running because of water in the basement. So that was, to me, made it completely worthwhile. So anyway, I think there's no silver bullet. If we have a long outage, we're all going to be in some trouble. I feel good about having solar plus batteries. I'm fortunate, but again, it's not perfect. Which is why, as a community, we have to be resilient and think about, the future, having microgrids, and utilizing all the solutions as they come down the pike. Hope that helps.
Yep, it does. Thank you. I think my answer there is probably to explore power walls that would again provide some kind of inverter backup for some time, as you called out, 3 days, 2 days, whatever it offers.
It depends,
with a
right?
minimal load. Yeah.
And a minimal load, I think that they're very effective. Because I have solar, they can be recharged with sun if sun is available. So there's a lot to be understood about that, I'd be happy to talk with you further on the email.
Thank you.
But one of the things that can happen, and we've heard a talk on some batteries, is when you know a storm is coming, so you may run out, you make sure your power wall is all charged up and ready to go. So yes, we're all on a little bit of a learning curve, but if you're watching the news, we all know that things are happening faster and more intensely than even the scientists expected. So we need to, think on our feet and be more resilient. And then one thing to Marsha was talking about, what the Mark Sandine, who, if you all know him, he loves to run numbers and make charts and graphs. And he said that if everybody in Lexington who had an electric car had a bi-directional electric car, and the whole town was out of power, if everybody plugged in their car to feed the grid, we could keep everything going for 9 hours. We have now. So lots of exciting things happening in this space. So I see Suzanne, you have a question.
Sorry, I had to take myself off mute. Yeah, I put a question in the chat earlier about going on solar. I've heard things like getting connections to the grid can be an issue. Is that true or not true? That they can only support, so many people getting onto the grid.
Would like to take this.
You.
Well, I think that there are delays in getting connected, because if there's too great of a load in a neighborhood, they may need to upgrade a transformer. Individual homes are less likely to set that off, but there hasn't to date been a case where they're saying, no, you can't get connected. Eversource, though, chime in, folks, can be slow in their interconnection. And I think that's something that we can talk to our congressional leaders on and press for more accountability from our utilities. But it's growing pains, but no, you won't be kept off of the grid because of that. It just sometimes the interconnection can be slower, or a large project that's not a just individual home can require new transformers. Maggie, you're chime in. I see you.
Yeah, I was going to just say the same, that I've heard that there have been delays, but yeah, as Marsha was saying, I haven't heard of projects being fully blocked.
No,
I think I need to learn more myself about exactly kind of what is the root cause of those delays. But I think Marsha answered that well.
But I would say the interconnection is just about you getting the money back from the utility for the power that you're supplying to them.
It's being turned on, I think. Actually, I think it's being turned on.
Okay, because
no?
I put my solar in 2014 when we did the Solarize, and we had solar coming into our house, but we weren't interconnected. So I could be wrong. You know more than I do about solar, but we'll look into that. These are all important questions, and we certainly want to get as many answers, as many questions out there, and then as many answers, because the idea is to help people move in this direction. And always just reach out to Maggie. Maggie will share the questions with any of us who could possibly do some of the research for her. We just want to make this as seamless and painless as possible for people. So we need to hear what all people's concerns and questions are. So Suzanne, did you have follow up to that?
No, thank you very much. Thank you. That's helpful.
And part of what happened in the past couple of years is it used to be you could only put 10,000 kilowatt on your rooftop, and now that's 25,000. So they are encouraging solar because they've been told they have to by our state government. When we enact climate bills that we reach things, it's the law. So these things have to happen. Any other questions? Okay, so we will, like I said, send out some information to people as a follow-up to tonight. If you only heard about this because of the mailing or from town, Maggie, you could point to, we'll put together all the resources that may have come up during questions, and Maggie can put it in her newsletter. Maybe the town can also just do a follow-up. This is a town-wide effort. It's not just LexCAN. It's not just the town. We're all working together to make this happen as easily and rapidly as possible. So thank you all for coming. Stay tuned to hear about when we'll do a town meeting article presentation on the various articles that are coming before town meeting. It's great to see everybody tonight. So take care.
Thanks so much to Maggie and to Andy for
Yes,
excellent presentation.
Thank you,
Thanks
Marcia.
all.
Really
care.
wonderful. I keep learning.
Bye-bye.
I want to say, I see there may be some folks on still, but Maggie, that presentation really is so good and so clear that you and Andy put together. I really enjoyed it.
Oh, good. I hope it wasn't too much of a repeat from last time around.
No, I keep learning, and I think both have, a really great grasp of all the detail, and it's just terrific. So
Been fun to crowdsource all the information, learn together.
yeah, and we'll keep learning about the solar. I mean, there are a lot of, like I learned today, that net metering, I've been trying to understand, I guess up to 10,000 kilowatts, you get 1-to-1 net metering. But then after 10,000 up to 25, now you'll get something closer to 60% of the, that comes back to you as you supply the grid. If you're using all your electricity at home, it's moot, which with electric cars and heat pumps, people are probably using it more on site. But this,
I
getting
wonder.
money, getting credit for your electricity that then you can bank on when you don't have solar I found that very interesting.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't dare try to characterize it in the formal way yet. We need something written down on that.
Small print.
Yeah.
But still, I mean, you're still getting credit for the electricity you provide for the grid.
Right.
So I'm learning. Yeah. Just not a full 1-to-1.